Hello YouTube. I had one of my subscribers ask me to show how I make my fence columns after I made the video of the mausoleums. So I went ahead and built this one right here, and I made a video of my step-by-step process of how I built this column right here and how I built the fencing that goes along with it. So enjoy the video. Alright, I'm getting ready to start building my column. Now, everybody builds columns in different ways. There's no real right way or wrong way to build columns for your Halloween display. It all depends on, how much time you want to put into them, the end result you're looking for, and all that kind of stuff to essentially achieve what you want. Now, I do want to apologize for the little bit of excess noise in the background. It's a nice hot day here in Florida, so I have a couple fans going just to try to keep it a little bit cooler in here. But anybody that's kind of watched my latest video of me building my mausoleum, the construction of this is pretty much going to be the same as far as the glue that I'm going to use in that caulking that I showed, the nails, gluing everything together, and the paint process and stuff like that. But I'm just going to kind of show how I do mine. Now, some people build them four-sided. I like to build mine three-sided. The reason I like to build mine three-sided is it leaves me a hollow cavity in the backside, for hiding lights or fog machines and things like that. So it kind of keeps a lot of that stuff out of the way. So I'm going to show how I build mine. First things first, I start off by going to the table saw and I cut myself my 3 inch strips. Now this one's going to be 11 inches wide, 11 inches deep. So I start off by making one at 11. And since this is a 1 inch foam, I rip these two at 10 inches. So this way when everything's put together, it'll be 11. So, and then the next thing you want to do is figure out how tall you want your columns to be. I always start with 36 inches, 3 feet for my main columns, and 4 feet for like if I'm going to be putting a fence next to it. I'm just going to be building a small one for this demonstration of what I'm building. So I'm going to do a 36 inch column. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to measure these up 36 inches. I'm going to cut 36 inches off. Now the pieces I'm going to be cutting off, I'll be utilizing for my top, middle, and bottom brace that I use to help keep structure to this, and also a place where you put your weights to hold them down, plus like your lights, fog machines, and stuff like that. So those pieces you're going to cut off, those are still going to be useful pieces, so hold on to those pieces. Now that I got this done, I'm going to start the first process of adding the caulking. On the back side here. Alright, now that I'm to this point, you can see what I got going on here is I have my bottom section where I can take like a grocery bag or something like that, fill it with sand, or even so much as like maybe a small cinder block or a stone or something. I can put it here, and what that'll do is that'll help keep it from wanting to blow over in the wind. Sorry if I'm shaking the camera. And then this next spot would be good for placing a fog machine or a light, strobe light, anything like that. So this way, when you're looking at the props from this direction, and you think about, if you're all your props back in the background, that light will project out, lighting up your props, and no one will actually see the light. So you can run your wires down the bottom, right into it, all that good stuff. And if you leave the silver on the inside, that silver will also allow the light to reflect off of it, almost amplifying your light for you, giving you actually more light than just the light by itself, unless you're using a very directional light, like an LED that shines. But say like you're using a regular colored light bulb, and you just put it inside here, that will give you all this extra where it'll fan your light out a lot more. Now before you cut your top piece, I like to make my trim pieces, which I've made here real fast. All it is, I just fed this through the table saw, ripped them 4 inches wide, then set the miter on the saw to create a nice taper there, and then use the chop saw to cut my 45s. This part is really no different than if, say, you're cutting trim or baseboard or something like that for your house. So up by, making sure obviously all my cuts are going to be, good. Make sure I don't have to do any trimming. And then I'll leave the cloth on there. Smear it in. Put a little on my joint. I try not to do any of my screws. That one looks like it can trim just a little bit nice. I try to put any of my screws in this part. And if I do, I put them in a spot where they're not going to be seen. I will have one nail right there to feather out, but that's not too bad to do. I'll do the same way I did with the mausoleum. Right, just put a little cotton over it and we'll see it, but the screws, they keep saying screws for some reason. The nails on top will be hidden by these two. The reason why you want to do these first is because then this is going to allow you to tell you how big, your top. So like right now I'm 12 and a half. So I'd probably make my top 13. So this way I have just a little bit of overhang. Same with this side, a little overhang. I have a basic column shape with just a little detail to it. Now you can get a little more creative with these if you want. I keep them simple, especially when you're probably going to be making 12, 13, 14, maybe even 15 of these things. Keep them simple. Alright, I got a top made. Now, on the initial opening picture, you notice that the ones had like a ball on the top. Now all I did is I just went to Hobby Lobby and found where they had like, I think there was like a 12 pack of large plastic Christmas ornaments. That's what I used for those, and that was perfect. I don't have any of those at the moment, so I'm just going to make just a little small little top piece for this one. You see I did 2 pieces to create a stair step, and then the top piece, and then same thing with the table. So I just kind of softened up these corners a little bit. Now I'm going to put it on top of the column. Now because I want to hold both those pieces plus the main piece that holds it on, a little generous with the caulk in there. Just stick it right on top. Make sure you make it even with the back, because since you're not doing it 4-sided, you don't want it past the back. Otherwise it'll mess up your lines. Like I said, you kind of gave it that little overhang for, to have a little detail to it. Push down onto it. Make sure you check your gaps with your fingers. Make sure the gaps feel even all the way around. Alright. And what we're going to do is we're going to let that sit and dry. And then once it's dry, I'll probably, I'm going to do like the illusion of like the plaster or the stucco falling off like the column or the actual brick that it was made out of. So I'm going to show how to do that after everything's dry. And then I'll soften these corners up to get rid of these the excess where the paper's at. And then I will do the paint portion, and then I'll show how I make my fencing. Alright, while this is finishing up drying, I'm going to show you how I do my fencing portion. Obviously everything's going to start with your columns, so exactly how big you want everything to be on your column, how far you want your horizontals to be apart, and all that kind of stuff. So I start off with my column, and I'll show you what I do. What I do is I start off figuring out, obviously you want the pieces that the 1x2s that are going to be going inside the actual column. You want to figure out exactly how far apart you want them. So I go from the bottom, I look at it, okay. I want at least the bottom of it to be at 5 inches, and I know they're about an inch and a half piece. I'm going to come to the top, and about 31 and a half we'll go with, because I'm about almost 32 to where my bevel starts. So I'm going to go 31 and a half, and I figure it's an inch and a half. So I'm going to have a post somewhere in this ballpark right here. Obviously, with these being 11 inches, I want them to be centered, so I'm going to be somewhere, kind of like this right here, I guess you can say, maybe kind of in this ballpark, like that. And then the other thing I want to decide is how high, when this thing is standing upright, how high do I want my fence, my actual slats, to be off the ground. I'm going to go with 2.5 inches, because that'll put me somewhere, right about here. So this way, it'll be a little high enough off the ground where it won't be an issue, but it's still be close off the ground and kind of give you more of like a kind of a realistic look of a kind of like, you can go all the way to the ground if you want. But I always look at it if I'm on the ground, and if you have like imperfections in your yard, you have bumps and stuff like that, and you have 2 columns like here, and then your ground has a hump. When you go to put your fence in there, that fence is going to hit that hump, that high spot in the ground, and it's going to want to teeter. So leaving it up a little bit keeps that from ever happening. So that's why I go with that. So, and then what I do is I build myself a jig to make all my fencing the same size every time, so this way I don't have to play guessing games with it. Now I'm going to show you my jig. Alright, here's my jig. Now, this is small scale. Picture this as a full 8-foot sheet of plywood, 4x8 sheet of plywood. And what I do is I took those same measurements that I did on there, and what I did is on the initial plywood, before I nailed all these on, I knew I had 5 inches and my 5.5. And then I knew I was at 31 and a half, down to the 30. So I knew right offhand that there's where my 2 horizontals were going to go. So at that point, then I cut myself some strips of wood that I could use to make slots for my vertical. And the reason for it being a certain length is when you look at the fence, the column I built, and I have the two pieces of foam on the top half, I'm making almost 2 inches worth of foam. So I want to make sure that the 1x, which you can pick these up to just 1x2s, based on 8 feet long. I want to make sure that I have, let's say the 2 inches right there, and that's my foam. But I want to make sure that I have enough inside there that I can play with. So I figure 3.5 is probably so pretty much that 3.5 inches worth of this 1x2 is what's going to be inside my column. And you want to see this. So I make these 3.5 inches as a reference, so I don't make them too big or too small on the ends. Now what you do in the middle doesn't really matter, but what you do on your ends is kind of important because that's what's going to dictate how much is going to fit inside your column. So then what I do is I build, I nail these on, and then I nail stop block on one side. I don't nail it on both sides because you're never ever going to find two pieces that are going to be exactly 96 inches. You might have one that's like 96 and an eighth, 96 and a quarter, something like that, and then you're going to struggle getting them in there. So I just put a stop block on one side. The reason for that is you don't necessarily want, say, one piece to be sitting like this, one piece to be sitting like this, and you start nailing your pieces on it, then your fence is going to be all crooked, or you're going to have to start all over again. This gives you stopper, so this way they're set. Now, if you want to make sure they don't move while you're doing your work, you can always throw a brad nail in there because it'll come right off anyway. It ain't going to hurt anything. So, and then after I nail these on, okay, set it off my line 7 and 8, and then that other measurement that I said where I want 2.5 inches from the ground up, I picked up this, which is a 2x3, which is 2.5 inches, and nailed that flush. So now when my board goes across here, and I take my post, and it goes in, I have a stopper. That'll make sure I have a straight line all the way across. Then at that point, which I forgot to mention why I have the column out, is how tall you want to be. So I measure from that 2.5 inches mark that I made on the column up to where I wanted to stop, and 32.5 inches work is what I'm going to use. If you want to maximize out your material, go just a little bit less than 32 because then you'll get 3 pieces out of 1 piece instead of I only have 2 out of 1 piece. So I kind of wasted material. So you want to try to go less than 32, like maybe 31, 70, something in that ballpark kind of thing because of the thickness of the blade. So, and after you establish that now you have your horizontals mapped out so they'll always give you the same, you got your height of your pickets established, and your stop block, then you just take your material and you take my horizontals like that. I'm going to put a little nail in here. I want to make sure that they stay flat. And that ain't going to matter because I'm not putting posts in right here. So then, now, like I said, since this is my diet of where I need to be, I can put that there. Nails in it. And you go to the other side. Now, how far apart each picket is pretty much up to you. You can try to decide. You can do the math. Take your 96, deduct your 7 inches, divide it by, say, if you want 10, and that'll tell you how big you want your little blocks. I'm just doing this just for reference points. That is the 2 blocks, same thing. And that'll allow me to take my next picket and put it on here. And if I have another one, I put it on here, and I put another piece in there, which I don't have another piece. This might be too short, but let's see. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, that's a little too short. What the heck? Let's throw it on there anyways. Let's say a broken one. Get the nails at a little bit of an angle here, so I feel like I'm grabbing something. Okay, beautiful. Then I can move these to the next part. And to be honest with you, I'm actually pretty close if I didn't measure that out. Now at this point, you can pull your fence off your jig, and now you have a perfect fence. Now what I would do is somewhere where you don't have to worry about painting it, put an arrow. So you know which one's your top and which one's your bottom. Because you'll notice that when you go to put it in your post, it won't look right. So at that point, now you have your fence made. Now I'm going to show you the next part that makes it easy for your columns. Okay. Now for the next portion. Obviously you want to make sure these line up perfectly every time. So you can take a piece of scrap, cardboard, piece of wood, another piece of foam, doesn't really matter. And after you make your fence here, you can use that as a guide, or you could also use your measurements as a guide where I measured up my 5 inches, whatever, and the top and all that. And then I measured my base because I wanted to be the same distance every time. And then an arrow for my top, so I know what the top is every time. So now that I've made this template, I can take and kind of like this. And what that'll do is that gives me my my location. All my books are going to be in for my little horizontal pieces. Once you got that, then, like I said, since we marked this, there's our arrow. This should slide right in here, just like that. So now, you actually have this in your yard plan. Now you have your column, you have your fence, your pickets. Like I said, you can do this however you want. You can make these taller, you can make them, whether half broken, some missing. The reason for it being so long, is say you're going around a corner, you can actually bend these either direction, like this, to go around a curve without having to do anything special. Or you just push them tight against it, and there you go. So now, at this point, you're ready to essentially make a bunch of these, however many you need to make a bunch of these, however many you need to make, get them all painted, and then the next part is to be able to just set them up in your yard. Alright, now to make the part where it looks like I have, where the stucco or plaster finish is breaking off the old brick or old block of the column. So I'm just going to randomly just draw something, say kind of like this, on both sides. Now what I'll do is I'll take the razor blade, I'll actually cut that paper out, which will make it a lot easier for the next portion, with using the router. Get my router set up and I'll show you the next part. Alright, next part what I'll do is you see I take a router and I take a kind of like a flat grinding wheel. And I set a depth just a little bit. You don't want it super deep. All you do is just carve that little bit out. Okay, and then at this point, what I'll do is I'll make it look like it started off with a crack. So I'll take my razor blade, I'll go all the way up to here. Like that. Pull that part out. The other thing you want to do is you want to smooth this edge out. You want to make it look like it, like it actually broke off. So you're going to take your blade at a little 45. follow your line here. You see where it's like, this would be the plaster, and my block is going to be down here. So now what I got to do is I got to measure out my block and how I want my block to look, and I'll use that with a straight edge. I usually start somewhere randomly in the center, you know, so like this. Get there. But you don't want it to look. You don't want it to look symmetrical. That's the key here. Is you don't want it to look like you planned it to stop and start in a specific area. Now, I'm going to assume I have here, and that one's good, but that's a corner one, so now my next one should be here, here, and here. Now, I could use the Dremel like I did when I did the brick on the big mausoleum, but I mean this is only a few lines, so I really don't see the reason for that. I'll just take my razor blade and I'll just go at 245-degree angles, one that way and one this way. Just peel that right out of there. Even if they're not perfectly straight and symmetrical, you know, as far as their gaps, that's okay, because a normal mortar joint wouldn't be necessarily 100% accurate every time you do this. Okay, now I'm at this point. You can see where I went around the side. You see where I gave it a little bit of a lip here, so it kind of looks like it's, you know, stair stepping down from like the plaster over top of the brick. I got the brick, you know, I did my little staggers, you know, like they're supposed to be. Now what I'll do is I'll do the same process like I did when I did the mausoleum, where I'll paint the whole thing gray, spray the mortar mix on it, and then put another layer of gray on there to make sure it's all sealed. I'll paint the brick with the brush, and then I'll do all my aging and all that to make it look like an old column, and then it'll be ready for display. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started with the painting. We're going to start with the gray, then the sanded grout, and then another layer of gray, and then we'll go on to the next stuff. Alright, for anyone that didn't watch my other video, you see me throwing that mortar mix on there. The reason I throw that on there is if you look at it, you think about if this was a column that was, say, sitting, out in a cemetery somewhere for 80, 90, 100 years, the concrete's going to have a lot of inconsistencies to it. So I like to do it this way because, see, I get a lot of, inconsistencies in it. I get a lot of areas where it's just not, it doesn't look the same. To me, it looks a little more natural, for something that's been sitting for a really long time. So I'm gonna finish doing the rest. Now that the whole thing is painted gray, now I paint the brick, and all I do is I use a brush, so I'm only wanting to hit the high portion of the brick. I don't want to get it down, obviously, into the mortar joints. Alright, now we're going to be at the next stage, which is going to be the aging portion. I'm going to be painting black, greens, and browns on this to give it the look that it's been sitting around for a long time. Areas where water and moisture collect, moss, that kind of stuff. So the next part is the part that is the creativity part. This is where you let your imagination do what it wants with these kind of props. Alright, the one I like to start with first is kind of a heavy diluted black. The one thing you'll notice that I use is like these, cheap, little Harbor Freight spray guns. I like them because, one, they're cheap. Two, they're easy to spray with. You can spray these off of a pancake compressor and all kinds of stuff. Two, not only can you use it as an actual full-on sprayer, but you can almost do like airbrushing a little bit with it too, just by floating your trigger. I'll show you what I mean by that. Say like right here, if I hold the, I can literally do like a very fine line like this, or I can press a little harder, or I can press really hard. So like if you're doing like a fine water line, you can just kind of just barely walk it down, and if you need a heavy spot, you just get a little heavy with it. So that's why I kind of like using it. The next one's going to be my greens. That will be for the greens. Now you just got to do some browns. Alright, so I'm out of brown in my acrylics, but now that I got enough paint on this thing to protect the styrofoam, I can get away with using spray paint now. So I'm just going to use a little bit of a almost like a Rust-Oleum rusty metal primer. It's a nice dark brown for the last little bit. And this right here is just more or less just to make it look like where areas where dirt, debris, and all that stuff collects over the years. So mostly on like flat areas is where you put a little bit of the browns. Alright, I'm all done with it. I just did just a quick mock-up with putting that little piece of fence in there. You can see where, like, I made the dirt stains and all that stuff. Kind of also like where the fencing would go into it. And then the whole thing where I said I'd leave the backside open for, you know, putting a light and everything inside there. And I just had that can in there for just some weight so it can't blow over. I set this my other prop up behind it just to kind of show, like, you know, with the lighting, you know, how the light projects out at the back of it, you know, to light up your props. And I have an extra one right here that kind of will light up the fence itself. Alright, this is pretty much what it's going to look like at nighttime. Now, depending on where you live and the overall ambient lighting that you have around your house and stuff like that will determine if you really need to light your columns up or not. But, you know, I lit this one up so you can see what it kind of looks like with everything being dark. And as far as the lighting in the back, you know, where you see with the light just coming out of the back of the column, that'll be totally up to what you want as far as, you know, what colors you want. I mean, there's multiple different color schemes you can go with, from green. I have a purple in there at the moment, but you have green, reds, orange, blues, you know, and stuff like that. You know, so it'll be up to you to decide what you think would be a really good color to light your particular prop up. Figure I'd throw a little couple, you know, color coordinations out there. But this is pretty much the finished product. Leave me a comment, tell me what you think. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button so the next time I build a project, you'll be one of the first people to see it. And thank you for watching.